All right, what a day. 49ers don't open their mandatory veteran minicamp until tomorrow, but we've got an update for you again, and this one pertains directly to the 49ers. I know Justin Jefferson might also tie into Brandon Aiyuk of the 49ers situation, but a lot of that's actually debatable. I'll get into that in a bit because it's such an outlier deal. We're going to get into the contract mechanics, but first, the 49ers are planning to make a signing. This is according to Mike Garofalo. Logan Thomas, veteran 32-year-old tight end who actually entered the league in 2014 with the Cardinals as a quarterback out of Virginia Tech. Logan Thomas is planning to sign with the 49ers. And I think immediately the 49ers have a new favorite to be the tight end too, opposite of George Kittle. Thomas had 55 catches for Washington last season. A couple years before that, he had 72 catches for Washington. Nobody else on this 49ers roster, tight end wise, has that kind of resume. They've been looking for a tight end too who can catch the football, and they've got a guy that caught 55 passes last year now on the team. So I think we can immediately slot Logan Thomas into this roster on the 53 man. We're going to get a look at him, I would think, tomorrow. If the 49ers are indeed signing him now, the minicamp will be tomorrow. So maybe Logan Thomas will be in the building. And yes, the 49ers are going to have to make a roster move to accompany this. But the tight end room is up here. We'll zoom in on it. Right now, we've got 4 guys projected to make the 53. And that was before this move. I'm going to make some changes right now. Kittle, Braden Willis, Cam Latu, Eric Saubert. Cam Latu hasn't taken the field yet. We could even, list Cam Latu as a potential pup guy to start the season. I'm not going to have him on the 53-man roster, though, anymore to have this projection. I'm going to replace Cam Latu on the 53 projection with Logan Thomas. And obviously take that Logan Thomas shade off of there. Maybe we could even flip Logan Thomas with Braden Willis. Because, again, 55 catches last season is nothing to scoff at. We'll put Cam Latu as a pup projection for right now. But he's got to stay on the 90-man roster. They're obviously not going to cut him at this moment. So maybe we put Jake Tonjes over here and Cam Latu over here. And we can go ahead and highlight Cam Latu. Now, somebody is going to have to get cut. You can't carry 91, and that's what the 49ers are at right now. But, Logan Thomas, this is cool stuff. Why don't you take a look at this? This is going to be his athletic profile coming out of Virginia Tech. Now, keep in mind, as a quarterback, not as a tight end, but this is an impressive spider chart for Logan Thomas. The arm length, the hand size, all really good. The height, he's over 6'6", but take a look at all the quickness metrics. All are firmly above average, and the 40-yard dash and the 10-yard split are especially good. The thing that makes George Kittle so special for the 49ers is that he's 250 pounds, and he runs a 4.5 40. That's a combination that's freakish. Logan Thomas is not quite at that level, but when he did come out of college at Virginia Tech, he was 248 pounds, 6'6", and he was running a 4.6 40-yard dash. And that makes the 40 for this was relative to quarterbacks. Remember, this is a spot. Well, actually, it says percentiles versus tight ends. So this is against tight ends. So that's even more useful for us. That's great. It's 88th percentile against tight ends, which made Logan Thomas one of the fastest tight ends to come out of the draft. Now, he's 32 years old now, so he's not as young as he was when he put up these measurables. That being said, he is coming off of his second best receiving season at 55 catches. So I would firmly put Logan Thomas in the driver's seat for that tight end 2 position with the 49ers. And such a cool career arc as well, right? From that quarterback position for the Arizona Cardinals. Here's Mike Garofalo's tweet to a position conversion in about 2016. It was a couple years into his NFL career, and that position conversion led to the 72 catch season and then to the 55 snap season. He's played over 1,400 snaps over his past 2 seasons at Washington. And think about the journey that the 49ers have gone on this offseason looking for that tight end too. They tried to sign Brock Wright. They tendered him. That was the restricted free agent from Detroit, but the Detroit Lions decided to match the 49ers offer and they kept Brock Wright. So now the 49ers have turned to Logan Thomas, who had some injury issues earlier in his career, but remember, over 1,400 snaps over the past 2 seasons and 28 games over the past 2 seasons. So he hadn't seen 100% of the possible action over the past 2 years, but he's seen pretty close to it. And I think that the 49ers have dealt with availability issues much, much larger than somebody who's been able to play 14 games a year over the past 2. So I see him as tight end 2. We'll get to see what kind of shape Logan Thomas is in. If the 49ers are planning to sign him, I'm sure that those evaluations are going along at least decently well. If he is around the facility tomorrow and Wednesday, we'll be able to get a look at him, maybe get some video of Logan Thomas. But obviously, the formal competition for that tight end 2 spot is going to begin at training camp. Significant move, because if you look at the 49ers roster, we've always talked about the weaknesses on this roster, and there aren't many because they are so loaded. But the weaknesses that we've talked about are tight end behind George Kittle. We've talked about potential offensive line depth that they're going to need behind Colton McKivitz and the interior line, but they definitely spruced up the interior line. I mean, all is green. Those are rookies that the 49ers have signed for the interior line this offseason. So I think that they do stand a chance to get better there. I've talked so much about what they might do at that center position and at right guard. Obviously, the right tackle spot is a weakness for the 49ers, especially relative to left tackle, but they have added a couple tackles as backups in free agency and Chris Hubbard and Brandon Parker. We look at some potential thinness at linebacker, especially with Dre Greenlaw out, but it does look like the 49ers have done what they can to address that. There was a big overhaul of the defensive line position. So I think that we always circled back to that tight end 2 spot as the one that might have been the biggest potential issue for San Francisco. And bringing in Logan Thomas, who needs to be highlighted in teal, by the way. There we go, as a free agent pickup. Bringing in Logan Thomas is something that the 49ers can say, hey, this helps ameliorate that position. Eric Saubert's the other veteran in there who I think has a chance to give the 49ers a much higher floor. He's been around the league 8 years now. He was in the same draft class and the same 5th round as George Kittle back in 2017. But Eric Saubert has never put up the receiving numbers that Logan Thomas has. And I will tell you, 55 catches, especially at age 31 for Logan Thomas last year at the NFL level, that's a significant deal. That again is nothing to scoff at. And I could tell you, and we go through some of the years for Logan Thomas here. First, he was with Arizona as that quarterback. And then by the 2016-2017 season, he had converted to the tight end position. It took him a while with Buffalo in 2017 and 2018 and the Detroit in 2019 to really establish himself as a receiver. But by that 2019 season with the Lions, he had 16 catches. It was 2020 with Washington where he was targeted 110 times and caught 72 passes for 670 yards. Last year was 55 catches for 496 yards and 4 touchdowns for not for Eric Saubert, for Logan Thomas, and also the highest receiving success rate of his career at 56.4%. A successful reception gains at least 40% of the yards required on first down, 60% of the yards required on second down, and 100% of the yards required on third and fourth down, with the denominator being the target counts. So the success rate for Logan Thomas was at 56.4% last year, which was the best of his career. Also, the second highest catch percentage of his career at 70.5%. So exciting news for the 49ers, who are addressing some of the weaknesses on this roster. We also have a quick little update on Drake Jackson. Drake Jackson posted a rehab video. He had left knee surgery. We don't have any more details on top of that as to, what the exact surgery nature was, but we do have this from Drake Jackson posted onto Instagram working. And I've projected Drake Jackson to start the season on PUP. I think the fact that he's doing rehab like this right now might indicate that that is an accurate projection, although I don't know anymore. So if we want to look at the 49ers roster and how it relates to Drake Jackson, I've got in here as a pup projection. I'll put Cam Latu as a pup projection as well, since we just updated that. And Drake, I mean, it's tough right now because Leonard Floyd, Nick Bosa, Yetur Gross-Matos, those are all locks for the 49ers rotation at defensive end. If it's a four-man rotation at defensive end and everybody else is healthy, it's going to be a battle for that final spot between probably Robert Beal Jr. and, if Drake Jackson does get healthy, Drake Jackson. But if he doesn't, if it's going to take some time, Austin Bryant, Alex Barrett, Raymond Johnson, and San Okiunanu are all options for the 49ers. But Logan Thomas is added into the mix. It's funny, I was about to start this show to talk about the Brandon Aiyuk contract precedent, if it was set by this Justin Jefferson mega deal, because we have Justin Jefferson full numbers now. Nobody in the 49ers ecosystem is actually like thoroughly breaking down this contract except for us here on the channel. So now we're going to get further into it because this is a huge deal, not just for Brandon Aiyuk, but in terms of the larger NFL ecosystem of contracts. And it might even be so big that the 49ers are able to kind of duck under the wave here, so to speak, if we want to use some surfing terminology, because I know that I use surfing the wave terminology in terms of the salary cap a lot. But I'm going to get deep into this. I was about to start the show talking about this Justin Jefferson contract and looking at the firm numbers. And then all of a sudden the Logan Thomas news came in. So I wanted to update you on the Logan Thomas news first. And then I said, okay, we're going to get into this Brandon Aiyuk discussion because we do have the firm details of Justin Jefferson's contract. Again, this is from the morning. This is just a quick update for you. 88.7 million right here in fully guaranteed money for Justin Jefferson and 35 million per year. He blew away every single receiver with this contract. In fact, I think it's very clear that Justin Jefferson and his representation, when they were going to the table with Minnesota and negotiating here, they targeted Nick Bosa's deal because he had the highest non-quarterback contract in football signed last September with the 49ers. That's what Jefferson wanted to beat out. And you ask, well, why is that a big deal? Well, it's a big deal because of this, because of the massive gap that Justin Jefferson has now implanted between himself and all other receivers. Just have a look at that. It's in fully guaranteed money, which is the right way to measure these things. And that's key Y, right? Key one right here. It's indeed about the fully guaranteed money rather than APY. A lot of people will be talking about APY to pretend like they know what they're talking about, but people in the know that it's about guarantees in the National Football League. So guaranteed at signing, Justin Jefferson, 88.7 million. Everybody had been dawdling around talking about Tyreek Hill's 52.5 million, trying to approach it. AJ Brown got close. Calvin Ridley wasn't too far away. A lot of people were struggling because most of the receiver contracts that we had seen over the past 2 months were all in the 30s. So while everybody was dawdling around in the 30s, struggling to break 40, occasionally getting up near Tyreek Hill at 52.5 million, Justin Jefferson just walked into the room and blew it up. 88.7 million, a $36.2 million fully guaranteed money gap between Jefferson and Tyreek Hill. So it's like, whoa. I use the skyscraper analogy because I was in downtown San Francisco when I was talking about it this morning in the video. They built the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco a few years ago. The previous high water mark, or the high building in San Francisco, was the Transamerica Pyramid. They built that in 1972. The Transamerica Pyramid is 852 feet tall. For a really long time, the Transamerica Pyramid was the tallest building in downtown San Francisco. For a really long time, the Transamerica Pyramid was the Tyreek Hill of receiver contracts in San Francisco, right? Then finally in 2014, 2015, maybe 16, they finished the Salesforce Tower. And that was 1,070 feet tall. So all of a sudden you went from 852 being the tallest building in San Francisco to 1,070 feet. So the Salesforce Tower is like Justin Jefferson's contract. Just because Justin Jefferson has signed a contract for $88.7 million fully guaranteed, 35 million average per year, doesn't mean that the very next contract is going to be 90 million fully guaranteed. That's not a given. It's not a probability. Just like the next skyscrapers they've built in San Francisco have not surpassed the Salesforce Tower. In fact, there's a pretty big gap. In fact, there's funny trivia here. They were going to build a skyscraper that was just a little bit shorter than the Salesforce Tower. They had already dug into the ground. It was going to be called the Ocean Wide Center. It was going to be catty corner from the Salesforce Tower right on Mission Street in San Francisco. It was going to be something like 1,000 feet tall. And you could still walk by it right now on Mission Street. There's fencing around it. It's just sitting there rusting because the company that was funding it went bankrupt, and obviously the economy took a turn down, and they decided to abandon the project. So and for these skyscrapers, they've got to dig deep into the ground before they go up so they could find bedrock so the things don't start sinking like the Millennium Tower, where I believe Joe Montana owned property. But anyway, they built down, and then they started thinking about building up, and then they abandoned the project. It's a really cautionary tale, obviously developmentally, if we don't want to talk about real estate and all that stuff. But it's also, I think, symbolic here for the receiver market, because even though the plan might have been to build a skyscraper nearly as tall as the Salesforce Tower, it never came to fruition. So even though people might talk about a receiver signing a deal nearly as big as Justin Jefferson's, it might not happen. And that brings me to key two. The 49ers and the Cowboys are not required to follow Minnesota's lead. And neither is Miami. I mean, there's this talk right now about the Miami Dolphins. They've got Tyreek Hill. And Tyreek Hill, he had the high water mark. Tyreek Hill doesn't have the tallest skyscraper here anymore, right? Tyreek Hill might want to have his deal adjusted so that he's closer to the top, because he's looking up at a $36.2 million gap in fully guaranteed money between him and Justin Jefferson. But bad news for Tyreek, potentially bad news for Brandon Aiyuk and CeeDee Lamb. Their teams are not required to look at this Justin Jefferson deal and say, hey, yeah, let's just go ahead and pay these guys more because Justin Jefferson got more. In fact, the nature of this contract, you could see how big of an outlier it is. I mean, if we put this on a chart, it would just be a spike up. The fact that it's an outlier gives it less of a chance to be some kind of precedent setting deal for Brandon Aiyuk and CeeDee Lamb. If it was just a few million over Tyreek Hill's deal, it would be more likely to drag those prices up immediately. Now, in the long term, of course, it's something that can be good for the receiver position because the franchise tag is calculated by the average of the top 5 contracts. So, of course, in the long term, higher salaries equal raising salaries across the board for wide receivers. But in the short term, this thing is so extreme that I do think that this key is the key one. The ingredients for a contract standoff, a true contract standoff, are in place. Because you look at this and you'll have, I'll put this back up on the screen since this is just such a staggering number, but you look at something like this and you could see Brandon Aiyuk and you could see CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase saying, hey, I want to be paid that much money, or I want to get, it's not necessary. You don't have to pay me as much as Justin Jefferson, but look, there's a $36.2 million gap in between Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson. If the Vikings did that, you can certainly split that difference, or you can go 10 million into that $36 million gap. I mean, all of a sudden there's a lot more room for these receivers to ask for a ton of money. Doesn't mean that the teams have to follow Minnesota's lead, but it does mean that the receivers can ask or expect that money. And if that's the case and the teams aren't willing to budge, if the teams are like, no, we want the market to stay here, kind of like Deshaun Watson's deal, right? You saw him sign for all that fully guaranteed money and people thought the entire market would move that way. It didn't. The rest of the teams just stayed true to what the market had been before then. But if you have the market stay put, yet receivers expect or demand more money to match Justin Jefferson's example, those are the ingredients for a true standoff. And that standoff can last through training camp. That standoff can last into the regular season. At some point, either the 49ers or the Cowboys, depending on how this evolves with Brandon Aiyuk or CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase and the Bengals, at some point there is going to be an inflection point, a deadline. This is what we always see in these deals. And that deadline can be reporting to training camp because teams obviously want their guys at training camp. The 49ers felt that they lost a little bit last year when Nick Bosa wasn't there. They felt that the protracted Deebo Samuel negotiations a couple years ago had a negative impact on them. So that could spur some action. But what really, really has been proven to spur action is the start of the season, because that's when players would start losing game checks for not being in the facility and not being part of the football team. I think, as we go through these keys, Brandon Aiyuk has indeed thrust himself into the top tier category. We have, so many arguments about where exactly these receivers belong. And whenever I hear one of those debates, I just go back to this chart of grades and the XY axis. And look, Aiyuk is up here. The efficiency last year, the yards per route run, this is separation grade from PFF on the x-axis and yak grade on the y-axis. I mean, he is way up here. He's a truly premier guy. So he has thrust himself into that top tier category. So he deserves to be talked about alongside somebody like Justin Jefferson, deserves to be talked about alongside somebody like CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase. I'm not saying he's going to get paid the same amount, but he's definitely in that cluster of receivers. Whereas, somebody like Amon-Ra St. Brown or Nico Collins, they were definitely in the cluster below. And here, I have a good illustration of the different clusters here for you to share. I tweeted this a little bit earlier today, but let's get this up on the screen as we talk about where Brandon Aiyuk might be. That should have shown up at this point, did it? Yes, it did. Let's make this a little bit bigger, though. Working on the fly. Now, to me, this is staggering, right? I mean, you've got Justin Jefferson at the very top at 88.7. You could see the gap between him and Tyreek Hill now. That's the vacuum that's been created. So these deals that are coming up, are they going to fall in between Hill and Jefferson? Are they going to still struggle to meet Hill? It just depends on what these teams decide to do. It just depends on if Jerry Jones and Jed York are like, hey, I don't know. Let's keep the market around the Tyreek Hill cap instead of this crazy Justin Jefferson cap. But when you look further down the list, you see the guys that also recently signed, like Jalen Waddle a few days ago. He's at $35.9 million fully guaranteed. Amon-Ra St. Brown, $34.7 million fully guaranteed. Then down at the bottom, Devontae Smith and Nico Collins, $34 and $32.1 million. Those guys, I call them B-list candidates just because they don't have quite the resume of somebody like Brandon Aiyuk, of somebody like CeeDee Lamb, of somebody like Jamar Chase. They don't, or especially Justin Jefferson. They don't have quite that resume, so they had to settle for something in the 30s. Aiyuk, I've long said, was going to be over 40. My question was, how close to 50 is he able to get? Then Justin Jefferson came in with 88.7. He completely disregarded the receiver market and targeted Nick Bosa's contract. And the question is, how big of an outlier is this? Well, it looks huge mathematically, but from a negotiation standpoint, did this pop the bubble? And if this did pop the bubble, well, then that's not great for Brandon Aiyuk, because that means that, it's not going to be a negotiating pivot point. The Tyreek Hill deal will stay as the negotiating pivot point. So that leads me to key 5. Don't expect the 49ers to abandon good business principles. They have Brandon Aiyuk under contract this year for $14.1 million. The Cowboys have CeeDee Lamb under contract this year for $18 million. The Bengals have Jamar Chase under contract for his rookie number, year 4, plus year 5, the 5th-year option next year. Those are all anchors. I don't know why the Vikings ignored the anchor that they had. They had Jefferson in the same situation, but they just decided to go wild and pay him. That doesn't mean, that goes back to key 2, doesn't mean that the 49ers and the Cowboys have to follow suit. Now, we may end up with a result somewhere in between, because there certainly is a lot of middle ground in between Jefferson's deal and Tyreek Hill's deal. So we might see something in between there. We might see something closer to Tyreek's number. That's probably the likely scenario, just because the teams don't have to budge. They don't have to abandon really sound business principles with this moving forward. But anyway, let's take a look at Justin Jefferson's contract, because to me, this is fascinating. I talk about we were so focused on receiver money, but he literally just took aim at Nick Bosa's contract. And I have some screenshots here that we can use. This is from Over the Cap. So this is Justin Jefferson's deal. I'm going to explain this so people have a little bit of an understanding of what's going on. And then I'm going to share. Yeah, I have Nick Bosa's deal here available as well. So this is good. So here we go. This is Justin Jefferson's contract. And it's funny because I went out and I showed you what Brandon Aiyuk's contract might look like this year. We can also pop that open on the screen here. So this was my proposed Aiyuk deal. It still is. I came out with this about 2 months ago. And what I proposed was something that was similar to the mechanism that the 49ers used with Nick Bosa. And I said to keep his salary cap hit low in the short term, what you would do with Brandon Aiyuk is give him 2 veteran minimum base salaries. In this case, I actually gave him 3, but 2 veteran minimum base salaries fully guaranteed. That's why they're shaded in orange. And then you would give him a signing bonus that was sizable, that you could stretch out like an accordion over 5 years against the salary cap. That is league rule. That's how you take advantage of having deep wallet, right? Deep pockets. You can go ahead and give out a big signing bonus that you stretch out over 5 years. Then you can do what they did with Nick Bosa, and you could add a second guaranteed bonus. It's called an option bonus that kicks in, but it's guaranteed in 2025. And that stretches out over another 5 years, including a void year. So that way you can keep the signing bonus cap hits stretched out, and you're only facing 20% of them every season. You're only facing a fifth of them every season. So with my proposed contract extension for Brandon Aiyuk, I was able to keep the 49ers cap hit for him down at 8.1 million this year, 12.2 million and 12.2 million in years 2 and 3. Anyway, now we go to the deal for Justin Jefferson. Here it is. So you saw the Brandon Aiyuk one. Look what they did with Justin Jefferson. And this is what the 49ers originally did with Nick Bosa, and before that, Deebo Samuel. And I think a little bit, they might have monkeyed with it with Fred Warner's contract, but they gave him a signing bonus that stretched out over 5 years, and they gave him an option bonus that kicks in 2025. So the exact same contract that I proposed for Brandon Aiyuk, we've seen the Minnesota Vikings apply to Justin Jefferson, except with different dollar amounts. Remember, I gave Aiyuk a $30 million here. We could check $30 million signing bonus right here and a $20 million option bonus. Well, they gave him a $37.4 million signing bonus and a $30 million option bonus. So what they did is they just subbed in bigger numbers to that double bonus strategy. And look, they kept the base salaries just like Brandon Aiyuk's at veteran minimum levels for 2024 and 2025. And they kept the cap hit down at 8.6 million. I projected 8.1 million for Brandon Aiyuk, but the signing bonus is obviously a little bit bigger here, so you can't prorate as much of it into the future, or you can prorate the same percentage into the future, but the number in the present is going to be larger. So that's the deal. It's really reminiscent of what we expect for the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk, but the crazy thing is that it's extremely, extremely reminiscent of the Bosa contract for the 49ers, because the Bosa contract, it's right here. Actually, this is the Jefferson contract. I tweeted. Do I have the Bosa contract available? I might not. I don't have the Bosa contract readily available right now. But anyway, the Bosa contract was the same thing. It was signing bonus, option bonus, dual bonus structure. And the thing about the Jefferson contract is that it basically emulated that one, but added a little bit more money. 88.7 million fully guaranteed, as opposed to Bosa's contract, which was 88 million guaranteed. The guarantees here, the full guarantees, go into year 3 of the deal, which is unusual for an NFL contract. Normally you'll give 2 years of guarantees, but once you, especially 18 for a non-quarterback to have 18.75 million fully guaranteed in year 3 of that contract, that's a big commitment from the Minnesota Vikings. And the crazy thing is that it's the high watermark by about 69%, which is just astounding. We've never seen this kind of gap before. This is indeed the widest range that we have ever seen in NFL history, contract-wise. At the quarterback position, we haven't seen somebody outpacing everybody else by this amount, and we definitely haven't seen it at the non-QB position. In fact, Jefferson surpassed Bosa. That was 88.7 versus 88 million. There's the gap again. When Jefferson surpassed Bosa, we look at Jefferson's number versus the rest of the receivers, 88.7 versus 52.5. Bosa surpassed TJ Watt's number at his position. That was 80 million. So Bosa raised it from 80 to 88. Justin Jefferson has raised it from 52.5 from Tyreek Hill to 88.7. The widest range we've ever seen in NFL history. Brandon Aiyuk's going to have to fit somewhere in that really, really wide range. It's going to be very interesting to see where he does fit. And maybe he's still under Tyreek Hill. I don't know. And maybe Tyreek Hill gets a new deal from the Dolphins, although I don't see why they would be particularly incentivized to do so. We're going to see where CeeDee Lamb fits into that range. It's total wait and see mode now with this Justin Jefferson contract now on the scene. And we're going to get to see exactly how things break in either direction. Going to be very, very fascinating to track. Anyway, those of you just joining, the 49ers signed the veteran tight end, the 32-year-old Logan Thomas. We went through how Justin Jefferson's contract has emulated Nick Bosa's contract, the shocker of the morning. And we're talking about precedent for Brandon Aiyuk, and we're just going to have to sit back and be smart and see what the precedent is. I talked about it earlier today. People are like, why couldn't the 49ers have gotten this done sooner? It's like, learn a little bit about contract negotiations, please. It takes the 49ers signing, John Lynch on one end, Jed York on one end, and it takes the player to sign as well. As you can clearly see, Brandon Aiyuk was not incentivized to sign before Justin Jefferson's, which is something I've been saying all along. I said, let's wait for the Justin Jefferson deal because everybody's talking about him breaking the market, about him being the top dog in that receiver room. Well, that means that other receivers who consider themselves A-list talent, and I think that Brandon Aiyuk qualifies as such. I mean, you could see here, this is the evidence for that right now. Those guys are going to be incentivized to wait, because if the word on the street is that Jefferson, with his volume and his efficiency, is going to top the receiver market, then Aiyuk is going to want to let Jefferson do that work, break through that ceiling, and then Aiyuk is going to have to hope that he can ride the wave. So Aiyuk had no incentive to sign before now. You might have incentive to sign now at a price that approaches Justin Jefferson's or somewhere in between that Hill-Jefferson gap, but the 49ers obviously would like it to be a little bit lower. But it's really, really hard to get a contract done on the earlier side of things when the player himself is not incentivized to sign it yet. It's a two-party thing. A lot of sports fans don't seem to understand that. They want instant results. Teams should just sign the player here. Maybe it's a Madden effect, right? You sit on Madden and you click a button that a guy is signed. Well, sorry, in real life, the guy actually has to want to sign, and his agent has to want to sign. And if his agent knows that Justin Jefferson might get a massive deal from the Minnesota Vikings, that could potentially help him. And we'll see if it does help the rest of the receivers here looking for contracts. But if the agent sees that, then it'd almost be malpractice for the agent to tell the receiver to sign early. The guys that we had seen sign early before this deal came through, they were typically on the bottom half of this list. They were at the A-/B listers of this list. Brandon Aiyuk believes that he belongs in the top of this list. He doesn't believe that he thinks he's worth more than signing. I'm sure like I said at the time, and I was right back then, and I'm even more correct about it now, the 49ers would have been thrilled to get Brandon Aiyuk at Amon-Ra St. Brown money, $34.7 million per year. People thought that was like raising the roof for Brandon Aiyuk or something. No, it wasn't. It was down on the list. They would have been thrilled for Amon-Ra St. Brown money, thrilled for Jalen Waddle money. This is the real money. It's up here. It's in the top 5 of the receiver room. And that's the kind of money that I think Brandon Aiyuk deserves when you look at how damn good he's been. And that's the kind of money that we're going to be talking about for Brandon Aiyuk. Now the range is just so wide that we've got to figure out exactly where in that range he's going to end up. Okay, 49ers Q&A time. Let's go. It's been a fun afternoon. A lot of stuff to talk about. Yep, the 49ers just signed a new tight end. I see people talking about it, and I already discussed that. A proven tight end, 55 catches last year. Once mediocre players get injured, it seems the regime really devalues them. Well, a mediocre player by definition probably shouldn't be valued too high by the regime to begin with, right? But player quality aside, availability is the best ability. Eric Armstead was a really good player for the 49ers, but he started getting hurt a lot. He missed 13 games in 2 years. So yes, they devalued Eric Armstead. They said, we think that you're only worth what, 6 to 10 million a year. I think they offered 6. They probably would have gone up to 10, but Eric Armstead got 14 million a year from Jacksonville. So they valued him more than the 49ers did, and they moved on. So availability is the best ability. The 49ers do want, especially the players that they pay at an A-list level, they do want to make sure that they are on the field contributing. Brian wants to know who's getting cut. I don't know. Somebody will have to get cut, though, to make room for Logan Ryan. Oh, sorry. Did I just say Logan Ryan? Logan Thomas. My bad. I just saw Mike put Logan Thomas. And I'm like, wait, did I say Logan Ryan? Logan Ryan was the DB last year that the 49ers had. With Logan Thomas signing and Eric Saubert as the inline blocker, is tight end 4 the only position open for competition? No, I mean, everything is open for competition. It's the NFL. It's a cutthroat league and a cutthroat roster to be a part of. But yes, I mean, tight end 4 doesn't play a whole lot, right? Tight end 4 is a true reserve position, probably not even active on game days. But I don't think that Saubert's won anything yet. There's Braden Willis. There's Cam Latu, Jake Tonjes. They're developing Mason Pline. But there's competitions all over the roster. Offensive line. There's competitions at the back end of the receiving room. There's a huge competition going on at running back. I mean, we can't take Elijah Mitchell's health for granted, but even beyond that, at running back 3, Garendo, Cody Schrader, Jordan Mason, Patrick Taylor. There's a competition going on for quarterback 2, Brandon Allen or Josh Dobbs. I mean, this is going to be a spirited training camp. Competition for that final defensive tackle spot. Is Kalia Davis going to be part of that rotation, or is Kevin Givens going to hold on to that? If Drake Jackson is healthy in time, is it him or Robert Beal? What about linebacker? Who makes this football team? Tatum Bethune is going to be competing, the rookie out of Florida State. Renardo Green, where does he fit in? Malik Mustafa, are they going to sign another safety? There's competitions all over this 49ers roster. All right, guys, time for me to go. I hope you enjoyed the show, but we got deep into things. So enjoy, and we'll talk to you very soon.